Welcome back to the podcast, you beautiful soul. Thank you for joining me today. I have a guest who's very aligned with me, so I'm really cool to have some pitching and catching going on today and chatting things that I'm really passionate about, I'm really aligned about. I have Sabrina Zohar. She is a dating coach and also the host of Do the Work podcast, and that name alone aligns with me, so I look forward to ripping into that. Sabrina, thank you so much for joining me today.
Thanks for having me, Lewis. I'm super excited to connect all the way from California to Australia.
I got your Aussie on the podcast. So look, let's go through your story. I love hearing people's stories for my own personal reason because I your story obviously just shapes you. It says who you are, what you're about, what you've gone through, and I guess how you've become who you are today. So I'd love to hear your story.
Absolutely happy to share. So my story, I have kind of two parts to me. So I have one part of me, which I have a clothing line called Software, and I started that in 2017 after my mom got sick, and it was like a whole thing. Long story short, she went to the doctor with a headache, and they found 6 brain aneurysms that corroded the top half of her vessel and 2 carotid arteries in her neck. So she was like a baby bird that nobody could touch. And so we had to be really, really careful with her. And Lewis, you're going to kill me. I just realized that my mic is not hooked up. And so I didn't want to continue this. And then we have shit audio.
No, hold up. Welcome back. We had a little bit of a hurdle, but we've overcome the hurdle and we're going to keep rocking and rolling. And we were at your story. Mum's the baby bird no one wants to touch. Let's keep going.
Cool. Yeah. Sorry about that, guys. But yes, my mom she was essentially like, if she was left alone, there was a risk that she would die at any moment. And so that kind of started me even just on a healing journey of understanding, like, I lost my job, I quit smoking, I quit medication, I went paleo, like I changed my entire life. I was going through so many changes, but that was more, I think, the outward doing, like working out and starting to take care of my appearance and getting, kind of getting my shit together in that regard. And then I started Software, went through pretty much, I was dated my father. I was like the cliche, went for the narcissist, the person that completely ripped me down. And in December of 2018, that is when I started therapy. And I'll never forget my mom saying, your ex better be careful what he wishes for. He wanted you to get better, but you getting better means you're going to see him for who he is. And sure enough, like that started my journey. And it started with me just being in therapy and talking, and then ultimately led to starting with like tapping and meditation. And okay, cool. These were new modalities that I started to embody. And when I say I was the poster child for anxiety, that's me being nice to myself. Like it was so bad. I literally didn't know how to sit with myself, and to the point where people that were with me couldn't sit with me. Like even my own sister would say that the anxiety was too much for her to handle, me just being in her presence. So it was hard for me because I had so many, like all these childhood wounds and traumas and things that I was consciously aware of them, but I didn't understand how they would manifest in my adult life. Then that brought me to saying, okay, cool. I've done all this therapy. I did the tapping. I'm still feeling stuck. So I started doing ketamine treatments. And that was the first time I ever saw little me. And I didn't understand it. I remember telling my mom, and I was like, oh my God, I was a kid, and I was stuck in the attic, and it was when dad was screaming. That was the first like touch, that in a meditation I had done where I saw me and my ex's kids. And I was like, there must be something here. Like we're connecting as children. And so I started really following that and really diving deep, deep, deep into like doing inner child healing and starting to understand that I think I've done like 15 treatments at this point, to truthfully to the point where like I don't need the ketamine anymore. I can just meditate and go back to those spaces. And that then started to mushroom into me just coming up with these different coping mechanisms of like regulating my nervous system, how to identify when I'm dysregulated. That all kind of mushroomed through from pretty much 2018 to where we are now. Like that's a consistent I guess goal of mine is like to always be evolving and getting to know myself better and finding ways that I can self-regulate and things like that. And it was maybe a year and a half ago, I was doing panels and podcasts for my company for Software. And I kept looping things back to Dig. And I remember I was with George Foreman 3 at his gym, and we were talking about this event we were going to do there. And he just looks at me and he's like, yo, dude, why don't you have a podcast? And my own limiting belief was, because nobody cares what I have to say. That was my childhood of just being the baby of the family, that nobody cared and shut her up. And I had to scream loudest for anybody to hear me. And I had a father that was inconsistent and in and out and a narcissist, all the fun stuff. And so then in September of 2022, so last year, I started the TikTok. That exploded. Then I was like, fuck it, I'll start a podcast. That exploded. And then the Instagram and then the dating coaching, and it all just kind of mushroomed. But the funniest, I don't know about funniest fact, but the interesting thing about it was, to the outside world, it was, oh my God, you're killing it. Holy shit, you're doing so well. This is crazy. Other people not seeing the trolls and the really negative things and aspects of that, as I'm sure you know. But what was so interesting to me was the imposter syndrome that I had, and my nervous system being so wildly dysregulated throughout the entirety of this experience. And me trying to understand, even like, oh, wow, my anxiety doesn't just affect me in dating now that I'm in a really happy relationship. Like, that's not the only place it can manifest. It started to manifest in me wanting to grow my podcast. My nervous system couldn't handle that. Me wanting to up the amount of money I make every month. My nervous system couldn't handle that. And so it's been this evolution of how to soothe. And I think what's brought me to where I'm at now and how I've been able to continue with this success and with everything is like, I'm very real about it. I give very real and practical uses and ways of being able to manage that anxiety that I think people can relate to.
Beautiful story. Super, super aligned with a lot of that, from the father stuff to the anxiety, the ways of healing, the different modalities you've gone down, the inner child healing, showing up in relationships, your nervous system not being able to handle certain stimuluses or certain paths you're going down. That was really cool. Really, really awesome. I would love to
Thanks, man.
I'd love to go straight into the dating. I know that's probably you're probably most spoken about one. I'd love to I guess probe you as someone who does, I guess, is in this world as well. I truly believe, and I filmed a video on this morning, is that your relationship is going to, there was a quote that actually summarized this really well. If you don't address your inner wounds, your intimate relationship will do it for you. And it's like, if you will do more spiritual growth, personal growth, inner work in the paradigm or the paradox of a intimate relationship more than anything else, because they're going to see the wounds that no one else gets to see, because we put masks on, personas on, and show the successful side of us to people that we meet in the street. But your partner, if it's a safe environment, you will see so many more versions of you and sides to you, and therefore more wounds to you to heal through. I would like to know your thoughts on what I've just said, your take on that, and what someone can do in a relationship as well. I'll ask those questions again, but what are your thoughts on that?
I couldn't agree more. And I think it's so funny. I had a client the other day and she was like, I don't understand. I'm fine everywhere else. I'm fine in every other aspect of my life. It's just dating. And I was like, well, think about it. Your friends don't see you all the time.
Yeah.
Your coworkers don't see you all the time. These aren't people that are seeing the depths and lifting the veil of who you really are. Nobody is going to be closer than your romantic relationship. That we know. And I think it's one of those fallacies too, of like, you have to be healed to be in a relationship. And it's like, oh no, no, that couldn't be further from the truth. You heal relationally. I have never been more triggered in the healthiest relationship I've ever been.
Beautiful.
And it sounds kind of like an oxymoron. How could that happen? Which I'd love your thoughts on that too. But it's like being with somebody, it really does. I have to come face to face. This morning we had an issue. I got dysregulated. He said something that it wasn't the end of the world, but it just bothered me. And within a couple of minutes, he looked at me and he was like, you're dysregulated. He's like, I can see it. I can see it all over your face. And he was like, talk to me. What is going on? And that was my space to practice open communication. And I was like, okay, hey, I got to be honest. When you said this is how I felt. And it really didn't land well on me. And I would love if this. And I think if you don't have, like, me being able to process and go through it and understand what was the trigger, where did I feel it in my body, what was the narrative, was there really a tiger here, like being able to kind of work through that whole process. Yeah, it's taken me fucking years to be able to do that. So I think for the average person, even just being able to identify what the trigger was, where did you feel it in your body, even if it's something as simple as like, my palms got sweaty, great, that's a great start. And really identifying, like, what is the narrative? Because the narrative playing around is really telling you what the wound is. It's really telling you kind of, is it a real tiger? Is there actually a threat that this person has done something that's going to hurt you or bother you? Or is this the past traumas and all of that shit starting to project and coming out onto your partner? So I could not agree more that you kind of heal relationally. Have you had that experience?
Oh, 100%. I've just written down a question that I'll come back to, but yeah, absolutely. It's you you'll get obviously tested in, like for me, the other growth I've had a lot is through doing the inner work, having psychedelic experiences, having coaches, NLP coaches, therapist coaches, just people, I guess, probe me with those questions. But I think like what you just said, like you're faced with it. They see you when you're at your lowest. They see you when the fucking sink breaks. They see you when you've got to pay the bills, when there's pressure with your finances. They see you in all of those walks, shapes of who you are. So by just nature, they're going to see those wounds that no one else really gets to see. And the question that I had for you was, I'd love to know your ways of thinking, or just maybe some tips for people of how you can use, because I say triggers reveal unhealed wounds and traumas that haven't been processed yet. So if whoever triggers you the most will heal you the most. So it will give you the awareness to go upon that. But having the consciousness and the emotional regulation to do it, and so it doesn't blow up into a fucking shit fight, is sometimes easier said than done. How you said it's taken you years. If you were to give some people some tips and advice on how to speed that process up to not let the trigger explode each time and actually use that trigger as a healing opportunity for both you and your partner, what would you say to that?
Totally. I think there's a couple of things. One, you can't shame or blame yourself into healing. You can't be angry at yourself into saying, why the fuck am I not doing this? And what's going on? It's like the number one step is showing yourself compassion and saying, oh, cool. I see a trigger. For me, a trigger is a place of exploratory. It's a place for me to become curious, to see what else is up there, what's under the hood. And I think for anybody, the number one thing, you can intellectualize this shit all day. You can read every book, you can listen to every podcast the two of us have, and every other Joe Schmo on the planet. But if you don't feel it, if you don't start to really feel in your body where you are feeling it, then you are doing yourself a grave disservice. Because then by being able to feel it and sit with it, and like for me, it's sit in the discomfort. By doing that, you again can assess, is this a real threat? Is there really something triggering me to have this kind of, am I responding or am I reacting? And I think if you can get really clear about that, and then again, what's the verbiage that starts to happen from here? If everything that comes out when you're triggered, if it's an immediate reaction that has to do with anger or exploding, and then it's starting to accuse your partner, off the bat, you're at a disservice. Your partner has completely put a defense mechanism up. They're not listening to you. Now communication is broken down. So instead we want to disarm. And so even if it means taking a second from your partner to say, hey, can you give me a minute? I need to just go process this for a second. And I did that this morning. It was great. I was like, just give me 5. I was like, just give me a minute. I want to come up with my thoughts. And I took myself and I was like, okay, what is going on? I didn't blame, shame, hurt. I wasn't angry at myself. Instead, I was like, hey, what's coming up for you? And how can I support you through this so that we can get to an answer? Yep. I think that just alone took me forever to fucking figure out, because so often when I was in a relationship, it was me versus them. No, I'm right. You have to see why I'm right. I'm very much a Taurus. I'm very much a baby in the family. Like, it's all adding up here. And so instead of looking at it as like, it's me versus them, it's like, no, this is us. We are a partnership and we are trying to make this together. So how can I come up with ways of communicating that so that my partner understands what bothers me, but I'm still taking ownership of what bothers me?
That was fucking awesome. Really, really beautiful. Can I lean a little bit into, you asked a couple of questions, like, what's the dialogue? Am I reacting versus responding? What are some of the questions, if there's any more questions from what you did ask, what are just some go-to questions people can do? Because if you've just got like a go-to question or a tool that you can lean on, sometimes it can help, especially when the emotions are flowing and the anger and the trigger, you're in your wound, you're regressing. What are like some of those questions? I know you did give a couple. Do you have any other questions that people can ask themselves to help them navigate those moments a little bit better?
Totally. For me, I always think, I'm like, how is this behavior serving me? Is this benefiting the partnership? Where did I learn this from?
Oh, that's good.
That was always a big thing. Where did I learn this from? And like, my sister asked me that. We were talking and I was like, James, I was like, you always shut down on me. And she was like, and I said, I was like, I always feel like I'm too much. I was always feeling too much. And she looked at me, she said, where'd you learn that from? And it instantly hit me. I was like, Dad. I was like, my dad, he would just couldn't handle emotions. My dad was like, just shut down immediately. He would walk out. He would like slap you. He would just say, shut up, something. And it's like, oh, so that's where I learned I'm too much. So now if I'm saying something to somebody else, it's like, that's where you can start to get curious. And for anybody out there that tries to say, I had the perfect childhood, I don't know what you're talking about, I didn't have any traumas. It's like, It's your perception of a fucking situation.
Yeah.
So were your needs met by your caregiver, you might not be able to understand that. And it might not be something so outward. So I think even just asking, where did I learn this? What's the narrative that's playing? How is this serving me? Is this benefiting our relationship? I think those are like some really good ones. Or what are some unmet needs that this trigger is trying to alert me to? Because I think, again, if we can start to get curious of like what's under the hood, then we can actually start to heal. And I will say, my friend Masha, she said this perfectly. If you had a gash on your right arm and nothing on your left, if somebody came up to your left and touch it, you would just look at them like they were crazy. You'd be like, all right. Somebody even remotely breathed on your massive gash on your right arm, you would have a crazy reaction.
Yeah.
And so that's kind of, to me, how I see the triggers is like, there are these really big wounds, and then there's the protective parts around us trying to keep us safe. So if we can start to befriend those protective parts and say, what are you trying to protect me from? Where is this coming from? What are you thinking that you're trying to help me with? By just getting curious in those ways, oh my God, you can make such an impact.
And you use the same, the open wound. I use like, if I touch you here, if I touch you there, and then it's, you be curious and you actually lean into it. Maybe similar question, but maybe outside the moment. So the dust has settled, you've kissed and made up, and you haven't ripped each other's heads off, and you guys are back into sort of just normal day-to-day stuff. But say you feel like, well, I don't feel like I've actually healed that wound. It's still there. What would you say for someone to be a bit more curious, to lean into it? Is there further things they can do, such maybe journaling? And the reason, to give you a bit more context, I love that you've tried so many different modalities. I haven't done the tapping stuff that you mentioned. I can't say the name of the ketamine treatment. I don't understand what that is. So I'd love to know, it's probably two questions in one. What are some things that people can do once the dust is settled? But then what are some of your go-to ones that have really moved the needle the most for you?
Totally. So it depends. There's like, I think when the dust is settles, and it's like, that's also too, it's like, if you're dysregulated, none of these questions are going to make any sense to a dysregulated body, because that body is just trying to survive right now. So I think the first step is like, we have all these different coping mechanisms that we can try when we're dysregulated, like ice cubes, or, shaking it, doing jumping jacks, things like that. Once I'm regulated, and even today, so like, for instance, after my boyfriend and I had a talk this morning, I actually had to ask myself, I was like, did I say everything that I wanted to say? Did I actually get to the bottom of what was bothering me? It was just me checking in with myself to say, like, did I show up authentically? Was I seen, heard, and understood? Did this person, did they create a safe space for me to express myself? If I can answer to that all yes, okay, cool. Am I still bothered by anything? Is there anything residual? Like, I just try to get curious about that. It's kind of like cleaning something out where you're like, did I get all the gook? Okay, cool. Great. I can put the cover back on. And so I try not to focus too heavily after the fact of something. Like, if I feel like we've squashed it, if there is still something residual, then we can start the questioning back all over again of like, what's coming up for me? Is this an unmet need that needs my attention? How can I support myself? Because it's really important. Do we need to co-regulate? Do you need to go talk to your partner about it so that you can kind of use their nervous system to regulate you again? Or do you need to self-regulate? Is this something to where I can say, hey, this has nothing to do with the other person. This is my shit. Cool. I need to sit with myself. And then as far as the modalities, journaling was monumental for me. And I hate writing. Like, when I say I hate writing, even making like things for Instagram, like captions, even writing a fucking post, I hate it. It is the bane of my existence. But I really pushed myself to do something that felt uncomfortable, which was writing, because for me it was, oh, my brain is all over the place. So I challenged my own negative beliefs. Journaling was huge. Ketamine is a psychedelic. So ketamine is a party drug. It's a horse tranquilizer. Yeah. But what it does is, when you take it under, doctor supervision, it helps you to go back to memories if you have an intention. So for me, my intention was, where am I stuck? Where am I stuck? Where am I still? Where are those sticky points? And it pretty much brings you back to those memories. It's wild how it works. And if you really, really hold that intention, and it allows you to experience the memory, not as if you're still reliving it. So you're not feeling the pain of, let's say, the child, but it allows you to see the memory kind of like a spectator walking through a museum. Beautiful. And then what I started to do, like, there was one memory I had where my dad kept saying, open the door, I'm not going to hit you. I promised I'm not going to hit you. I got into a fight with my sister. I ran into my room. I was like 8, and I had braces, and I'll never forget. I opened the door and he hit me. and I was just bleeding everywhere. And he left, and that was it. He left for 2 weeks. He went away with one of his girlfriends. My mom didn't know about. And I'll never forget sitting on the couch, and my brother was like maybe 14, going, how the fuck am I going to take care of this household? I'm only 14. That was the first memory I really had of, how are we going to live? I'm scared about financials. They're always give and go, take away. Like, I always see my dad baiting money above us. So I did a chemistry treatment on that. And I went back, and instead of standing on the outside of the door where my dad was banging, I went on the inside, and I sat with her, and I asked her, what's going on? Where do you need me? And she was just crying, saying, I just want to be taken. I want to be saved. I don't want to be here. And I was like, oh, you want to be saved? Great. Let's go. And I took her out, and I threw the door open, and I told my dad to fuck off. And I took her to a safe space. And so now every time I meditate, I make sure that she's still in the safe space versus back in that room. And so anytime I start to feel that anxiety, something triggers me, I know, I'm like, she's back in the room. She's holding onto her suitcase. I got to go get her. And that's what ketamine allowed me to do, because I had such traumatic experiences with my dad in the way that he would treat us as kids, that I blocked out a lot of it. So I think for people, if you really feel like, holy shit, I just can't get there, it's a great alternative. But meditation now has become an equally as amazing practice for me, because I think once you do a few of those and you understand how to visualize, it becomes easier.
That's beautiful. Just a small comment on what you just said then. Dr. John DeMartini is one of my biggest mentors, and I listened to a podcast on it. It was really funny. He's like this, they were super high on weed, and this funny story happened, and I'll skip that part. And this guy walked up to them and he said, are you guys high? And he's like, yeah, man. It's like, do you want to get really high? They're like, yeah, man. Like, learn how to meditate. And he walks off. And he's like, since that day, he's never touched psychedelics or weed or anything like that. And you can induce those same experiences through meditation, but it's just generally harder, more focused, discipline, can't be fucked, it's distracting. So what's your sort of, I guess, way to meditate? Because I know the word can scare a lot of people. Just like, I don't know what I'm doing. I'm getting too distracted. Like, how am I meant to think about nothing? So what's your sort of go-to way of meditating, or has that evolved as you've continued down your journey? How do you use that?
Yeah. So actually, my friend, his name is Minaj, and he has an app called Open. He's from Australia. And he got me meditation in 2017 when my mom was sick. And I was using it as just a means of like, okay, let me try. Because my goal for meditation was to see thoughts go by and not attach to them, because I would ruminate like fucking crazy. So that was my goal. And so I always suggest to anybody, I'm like, start just even a 5-minute guided meditation, a body scan. Go start simple. Do something to at least be in touch with your fucking self. Then you can escalate. Meta meditations, which is like loving kindness meditations, giving yourself that love, was really tough for me. And so I think anybody struggling with some self-worth issues, I'm like, go do a meta meditation. I think now I do like a daily, every morning I wake up, I do a daily 10-minute meditation on Minaj's app Open. And then what I started to use is actually this really cool thing called Sensate. It's like Sensate. And they like, my friend reached out to me and was like, yo, you should try this. It activates the vagus nerve. And so it's like a little rock, and you put it on like right where the vagus nerve is. And which for anyone who doesn't know, the vagus nerve is responsible for, the dysregulation of your nervous system. So it helps to calm and bring you back to ventral. And it is so rad. It's like 10, 20 or 30 minutes. There is no guide. So it's just music, and it vibrates on your chest in different wavelengths to bring yourself back down. And I have found that when I do that and I incorporate some inner child work, it is another world. Like, what, to your point of, you don't even need psychedelics. I can get so far in and feel and cry. And like when my dog passed away, I used that to kind of reconnect with him. And what I also tried to use that for was to see those painful memories, but reassociate them, so that I had a calmer nervous system while having those memories, and it didn't affect me as much now in my day to day. So that was monumental. What psychedelics did you use?
I still experience them. I use mushrooms personally, so I don't know the type of mushrooms, but yeah, I do. I had my first experience when, how long ago was that? Maybe 3 years ago, and I've come from like a smoking, drinking family. Hate drugs, not a fan, super against it. A lot of judgment towards it. I watched a documentary called Fantastic Fungi. It's on Netflix. Really cool documentary, and visually incredible, and it will open your mind up to the power of what psychedelics can do. And yeah, I find it's just allowing you everything you said. Absolutely, just going back and cleaning up things that you might have forgotten about because your mind's blocked it off because it's painful, you don't want to touch it. But it's just like it allows you to rewire so easily. It allows you to tap in and to connect with source or whatever your spiritual beliefs are so much easier. Yes, you can do that through meditation, but I think it's just it's like that on steroids. It's such a potent experience, especially if you haven't really not mastered, because you can't master it, but if you haven't gone down the meditation route and practiced and put the effort into that, it can give you that taste tester of it. But I still do it probably every 3 to 6 months. Just I find as a new discovery period, I go get a weekend away for myself, get an Airbnb to myself, and I have a mushroom weekend. And I just take notes, journal, have breakthroughs, heal. I do a lot of healings from dad through that. So yeah, I do that every 3 to 6 months myself, and I'm open to other things. Ayahuasca, I haven't gone down that pathway yet. Something I've been drawn to, but haven't yet touched it. So yeah, a little bit here and there, but nothing super crazy.
I've done mushrooms recreationally. Like I've enjoyed them. But that's something that I want to do. There's this guy in LA that does it, and he does like a whole gong experience. And I'm like, okay, that's right up my alley. But I think ketamine, mushrooms, it's like, I'm with you. It's like, I'm not trying to use those on the day to day, but I think if you're feeling stuck or you're feeling like you just don't know, it's the perfect way under doctor supervision to test it. Now, on that same token, I highly recommend anybody to talk to their doctor first, because I have had people that haven't had the best experience. So it's something that is something to look into. But regardless, I think it's such a cool modality to be able to tap into that. And breath work. Breath work is a whole nother, like, you do a 30-45 minute breath work like series. I actually did that. I did yoga, and she did 20 minutes after, and like I felt like a different person. And because I pushed myself, which is why I always talk about, like, when you sit in the discomfort, it's the same with doing ice baths. It's like, yes, a lot of people do it to look cool on Instagram, but really, what's the reason that you're doing it besides for like cool, the inflammation and the health benefits mentally? And same with breath work, is it pushes you to a new boundary. It pushes you to a new place, and it allows you to, one, realize how much stronger you are, but two, realize how much stronger your mind is as well. Because if you can do 1 minute, 2 minutes, 3 minutes, you're cool. Like, and now what? What else is there? And I equate that to same with healing. At first, it's going to be really fucking uncomfortable because you are facing things that you have been avoiding all of your life. But once you really take the dive in and say, okay, I'm going to do this and I'm going to commit to myself, it's one of the most beautiful explorations. And eventually you get to a place where it doesn't hurt as much.
Fucking powerful, really powerful. Something from that was, what do you do daily, weekly, monthly, consistently? What are your sort of routines to help you to keep regulated and regulate as you go, but consistently heal? Like you mentioned, I think you used the word evolve as you spoke earlier, but what do you do to consistently heal and evolve and to continue to do the work?
So for me, therapy is still every week. Like, I love my therapist. I'm always trying, like, I'm self-aware to probably a fault. Like, I can tell you why I do everything I do. Like, I'm very aware of it. And so for me, it's become a conscious effort to reconnect with my body as well, because oftentimes I can get very heady. And so it's like practicing movement every single week. Like, I've fallen a little bit out when I moved to San Diego. So I fell out of having my routine. And so I'm kind of recalibrating with all this new stuff. But like movement, even now, like, I had my dog and we would go on walks every morning. And obviously he passed away in November. So that went away. I still make it a point every single morning I wake up and I go on a walk, because it helps me to regulate, helps me clear my mind. And I'm always trying to find other alternatives. So like the rubber band, like keeping a rubber band on my wrist and snapping it when I feel dysregulated. Yeah, I mean, that's like for sure. I try to keep routines in general, because for who I am, it makes me feel, it just works for me. So I know I'm up at 5 every morning. I'm in bed by 9. I have my trash TV when I want to lose myself. But I think daily is movement and meditation. Weekly, probably the same. And then definitely monthly, or not so much monthly, but I would say every 3 or 4 months, I do another ketamine treatment. Kind of like what you were saying with mushrooms, like just a little bit of a rewire, a touch base. What else is coming up for me? Kind of seeing, again, is there any gunk left? Those were probably things that I practiced the most. And I'll see if anything else comes to mind.
Fantastic. No, I love it. Love it. You mentioned a couple times the tapping, the snapping of the rubber band, and also the question that I didn't actually ask before. You mentioned the question, where's this coming up in your body? Why do you say that? I'm asking actually as a coach to why it is that you ask that. Why do you ask that? Oh, and what's the
So
what's the thinking behind it?
so being able to connect to your body, like I said, we can intellectualize healing all day, but until we actually feel it, that's the biggest disconnect, because people don't want to feel the pain, so they'll do anything to distract. But when we can face it, it's the same thing as the ice bath. Like when you face it and you sit in it, and then you realize, well, I guess this isn't that bad. Like, so let's say, for instance, the guy's not texting you. And that's like the number one thing. The guy is not texting you. So I get this where I'm like, I'm freaking out. I'm losing my shit and I'm ruminating forever. And then when I'm like, cool, why don't we try something? What would it be like if he didn't text you? And you get the like, oh, I can't. And it's like, no, no, no. What would it feel like for you if that person didn't text you? Oh, yeah, I guess it's not that bad. It's like it allows you to feel it so that your nervous system can go, oh, that's it. Oh, okay. Well, I can keep you safe from that. I'm good. And so I think for reconnecting with the body and being able to feel it and being able to understand what that feels like will help you too when you're dysregulated. Because like when I get dysregulated, I already know how it feels. I know that my shoulders tense up. I know that my chest closes up. I know that I get super sweaty. The shoulders is my first thing. And if I'm not aware of my body and where I'm feeling it, I could be walking around dysregulated all day. But because my mind might not necessarily understand it, but my body is, there's a disconnect.
Okay.
So being able to have both to know, that's the other part of dysregulation, and being able to, again, be aware of how you're moving and grooving in the day.
Okay. So it's kind of not a check-in, a reset, just to understand where it is, process it a little bit more, feel it a little bit more.
Feeling it is I would say, again, the biggest. I get so many clients that are like, I've been in therapy for 15 years and I've read all the books and I've done da, 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 da. And you're like, again, though, have you let yourself sit in that feeling? Because again, think about the person's not doing something. So what's your thought? Okay, well, I have to text them, or I have to go do something, or I'm going to get out of the house. It's everything revolves around distraction. But if we face it, it's a lot less scary. And then our mind can start to go, oh yeah, see, there's some contrary beliefs. I have faced this. It wasn't that scary. And I even noticed, like the other day, I was dysregulated with something that happened. But then I checked in and I was like, I don't feel it as much in my body though. I was like, I mentally got stimulated. I was like, but I felt actually really calm. And that's when I realized, like, oh, I'm growing. Wow, I've been able to face this. And now my nervous system doesn't need to react as much. It's really just the mindset that I have to focus on. That's why it's so important.
Very powerful. You've mentioned inner child work a fair few times. Can you just explain for the listeners, like, what is inner child work? How does one do that?
In a nutshell, inner child work, essentially, it's like all the triggers and the traumas and all that are stemmed from childhood, from 0 to 7 or 10, depending on who you speak to. But let's say it's 10 for just argument's sake. From 0 to 10, it's called egocentric age. And egocentric age essentially is whatever is going on. So let's say you had an inconsistent parent, your parents divorce, whatever, those are the little T traumas. You as a child, we don't have the cognitive ability or awareness to understand the situation. So it is more of a threat to us as a child to see our caregivers or our parents as a threat versus internalizing as it's us, which is how those core beliefs start to get stemmed. Thus, then that's the attachment style that starts to it. That's how you are with your caregivers. So the inner child work is understanding that almost all of the traumas and the triggers and everything stem from a little kid inside of you that just needs you. So for me, at least, I knew I had, again, inconsistent father. My brother was sent off early. My sister kind of abandoned me. My mom was never really there. So I had a child that always felt like she was too much, too needy. No one was ever going to be there. And she just wanted to be saved. So as an adult, I kept dating people that would replicate the relationship I had with my dad and my brother. Because if I could convince them to love me, well, then I win. Then I've overcome all of those core beliefs. Because look, a narcissist like dad loves me. So fuck you. And instead, what I realized was, nobody was going to save me but me. And so by doing that inner child work, essentially what you're doing is you are reparenting the kid in a way that you were never parented. So you are letting you know, I love you. I'm here for you. I support you. I am never going to turn my back on you. I will not self-abandon and leave you behind for somebody else's wants, needs, or desires. And a simple way, something that's a little bit more user-friendly to get started, write yourself a letter. It's so profound. I had a client, she messaged me and she's like, I held a photo of me when I was a kid and I wrote myself a letter, and she's like, I haven't cried like that in years, because it's the one person you have abandoned you like everybody else. Yeah. And so when you finally go back to say, okay, I'm here for you. Good luck. Get ready. It's beautiful though.
What were some of the childhood stuff you've worked through that were the harder ones for you?
The abandonment for sure. Feeling like no one was ever going to love me. Like I had a Middle Eastern father who was an immigrant, and my mom as well came from, like, when I say like to the point where like my sister would get math problems wrong, he would hit her. Like that, my dad had zero patience. He hates children. He doesn't like them. He doesn't understand it. So he would just very dismissive. He would hit us all the time. He would use the belt. My mom would use soap in our mouth. There was no trust. And so it was constantly like always trying to get his attention. He would leave all the time. Like that memory I told you about of him just walking out for 2 weeks and going off on his own. So for me, it was really, really hard and important for me to look back and say, no, your needs do matter. You are beautiful. I love you for who you are, and I accept you, because I always felt like I was too much. I'm too much. I need to water my personality down. I'm too needy. I'm too this. I'm too that. And instead, I had to realize it's not that I'm too anything. I was just asking the wrong people to see it. And when I finally acknowledged myself and accepted myself and had to look back and say, that was really shitty. Like I was almost kidnapped when I was 7. I'd like have normalized that experience so hard. This is actually the first time I've ever talked about it in public. I had normalized that experience to the point where I just thought it was no big deal. And then when I told my therapist, I saw her face like even a couple months ago, and she's like, you know that's not normal, right? Like you just completely normalized this entire experience. But for me, it was everything was brushed under the rug. Your needs don't matter. Get over it. Be a people pleaser. Remember, keep sweet. That's what women do. They don't open their mouths, so don't have an opinion. And it was overcoming all of that, overcoming all of those thoughts and going back to show me that it does matter. You do matter. And what you have to say matters. And so by being able to be her voice, I found myself.
That's so beautiful, so powerful. I've got people in my life, and I won't use their names, but I have people that would really value everything you've said in this, and I know them very closely. What would you say to them who have things that they haven't healed through, and it's weighing them down in their life right now, and they're too scared to do it? And whether it's scared or whether it's ego, whether it's fear, what would you say to someone who has work to do, but they're just not doing it?
Usually I start with like, nothing changes if nothing changes. So if you're sick and tired of being sick and tired and you are not, if what you're doing isn't working, then let's try something different. And I understand, I can have compassion for people. I was that person. I was that person that didn't get it. Or for so long, my sister used to be like, well, you're the common denominator. And I'd be like, you just don't get it. And you don't understand. And da, 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 da. And it's okay. She couldn't blame or shame me into healing. So instead, what I had to realize was I hit rock bottom and I was tired of doing the same thing. And if that's where somebody is, I would say, what do you got to lose? You have more reward than you do risk. The risk is minimal. The reward, though, is you living the life that you in your mind have envisioned, but I don't necessarily know that you believe you deserve. And so if we can start to chip away at that, then I think you can actually start to make some progress in life. And again, what's so scary? It's facing yourself. Well, then now more than ever, I think it's time.
That line you just said then, can you say it again? The vision that you don't think that you believe it or you deserve it. Is that what you said?
The life that you want that I don't necessarily think you deserve, that you believe that you deserve. And I think that's always the disconnect. It's like you hear it all the time. And I'm sure you hear it with your clients and with anybody that you work with of like, I want all this stuff. And it's like, that's great. But are you willing to sacrifice and do what needs to be done to get it? Do you actually believe that you are deserving of that? Because if you, my favorite quote I saw, I have it in my room somewhere. It says, you'll see it when you believe it. And it's true. It's like, if you really believe in your heart that you are worth all of these things and you will do, then your actions will start to align in that. And then you will start to see your life change. But until you believe that you are actually deserving of that and that you do have it, belong at the table, it's a moot point.
It's Wayne Dyer. I'm a big fan of him. And he says, I'll butcher this. When you change the way you look at things, the things you look at change. And it's that kind of resonates just then with what you just said. This has been beautiful. Thank you so much, Sabrina. This has been amazing. I've gotten so much value from this as a coach who's in a very, very similar field, or I do work that overlaps with some of the stuff that you do. It's been fucking awesome. I've got a lot of light bulbs, some good questions for me to ask myself to keep working on me and still healing through my stuff and my childhood. So for anyone that's listening that want to connect with you, want to see your stuff, want to reach out to you, whether to do the work with you or just to connect with you, where can they find you?
Sweet. And first of all, thank you. I'm so excited. And I can't wait to have you on Do the Work podcast for anybody that's listening and wants to hear the flip side of things. So yeah, they can find me on Sabrina Zohar on Instagram or TikTok, and then Do the Work podcast on Instagram, or Do the Work on Spotify, Amazon, or Apple.
Beautiful. I always finish with a vulnerable question. What's something that you're still healing on, working through that no one else gets to see?
Ooh, great question. I think that probably this is the biggest one, is that my voice matters. And I'm still struggling. I think so many people see me outwardly at the podcast, I have the TikTok, I have and they must think, oh, she's so confident. And it's like, no, I'm still working through that. I'm still working through that. My voice matters, that I have a place at the table that I have earned, and that I've been able to take pain into purpose. And I'm still working through to accept that what I have to offer is valuable. And that's my own shit.
Beautiful. I appreciate that. I always get a bit of goosebumps at the end of those questions. Thank you for your time. Thank you, listeners, for making it all the way to the end. And Sabrina, thank you again.
Thank you for having me.